And I often talk about this expression. I say, like, actions only speak louder than words when your intentions are clear, which is kind of what you say here. You want to make sure that the person who's observing your action knows the meaning behind it. If I don't know the meaning behind your actions, I'm going to read it from my point of view.
You're listening to the Relationship Revival Podcast with Jon Dabach, also known as Mr. Spirituality. That's me. I'm your host, giving you insights and guidance from over 10 years in the field of this amazing journey we call romance. On this show, I go over everything you need to know about how to get into a relationship, how to get the most out of a relationship, and sometimes even how to gracefully end a relationship without pulling your hair out and going crazy. And occasionally, I'm even joined by new and old friends who are also relationship experts to bring you guidance and wisdom with new perspectives. Thanks for stopping by.
Dr. T, Dr. Timerman, thanks for coming back on the podcast. I'm super excited. You know, your interview about your IAP model, I still use it in my own counseling practice. I talk to people all the time about it. So when you told me that you wrote a book, and I felt like, well, you got to come back on and tell people about it. And I'm excited to hear all about it, what it was like to write it, other goodies you kind of discovered along the way, and how people can, get their hands on it.
Yes. Oh my God. One, thank you so much for having me back. I'm so excited to hear that you use it. Also on our conversation when you're talking about like love and being from a non-human space, your source of love, I use that all the time. So I love that you got as much of from last interview as I did.
Yeah, my pleasure. So first of all, how long did it take you to write it? Did you kind of refine the model as you wrote it, or did you feel like you've been using it so much it just kind of poured out of you?
Yeah, more the latter. The theory itself remained the same. The theory has always remained the same. The relationship between intention, action, and perception. I did identify additional strategies that I've been using and understanding that, oh my God, there are things that I'm using that are actual strategies to teach and to talk about, which has been very much well received within my family, friends, and even my clients, which is it's amazing. But I remember when you and I did the interview, I think I told you, like, I had written chapter 1 on the plane by hand, and I kind of stopped, and you really inspired me to be like, you know what, go for it. And I did. And so since then, from then to now, actually December is when I finished writing it. So from our interview to December is when I finished writing everything, and started going through finding a, self-publisher, understanding the guidelines. And then in the last month or two, we did the final, like, proofing and stuff like that.
What's the plans for the release?
If all goes well, the release will be in August. That's what we are hoping for. We are now just working on the cover and the formatting to get everything done. And
very nice. So for the people who didn't listen to the whole interview, first of all, I recommend they do. It's in the archives. You can go and listen to it. But let's give them kind of a refresher on intention, action, perception, and kind of what the basic philosophy is and how you use it as a counselor.
Absolutely. So the relationship between that intention, action, perception, right? The IAP model. It's funny because I was talking to my husband about this in our walk this morning. It was actually born from our relationship. I noticed that there were two instances mainly, but a couple patterns where, like, I left the room and after, like, as we're in the middle of a fight and he didn't follow me. But my thinking when I left the room is that, well, if you care about me, you're going to follow me. And when I did it, it was like, well, then you don't care about me and blah, 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 right? Whereas when I asked him, like, why did you not follow me? He's like, well, you created space. So I thought that me staying put was respecting you, because that's what I would want if I had walked away. I was like, okay, so things got lost in translation. Fine. And then maybe a month later or so, there was an instance where we are in a family trip with my family. We're all in the pool, and then he gets up and goes, like, there's the first row of like the pool chairs. second row and he sits by the second or third row. And I'm thinking, we're never with my family on a trip. Like, why are you, like, why did you go away? And as I'm walking to him, I'm like having all these intrusive thoughts of my perception. And I sat down and I simply asked him, why are you so far away from everybody? And he said, am I far? Like when I look up, I can see everybody there, but this has shade. There, you're like very sunny. And I, wanted to be in the shade. And so again, it got lost in translation. And I started realizing our intentions, they are not always well translated
Yeah.
through our actions. And perception is from my point of view. If I'm angry, I will likely look at it from an angry point of view. If I'm frustrated, if I come from a household where I learned that like to be very suspicious of actions, then I will take it from a suspicious point of view. So even as I'm reading your book, there is a time that you talk about, and I even like highlighted it. You're talking about the repeat
Oh,
offenders,
the apology
right?
book. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
In the apology book, yeah, and you say something like, next, you've got to prove that you're serious about your changing. Words are cheap, especially when you're use them over and over again. This is where actions speak louder than words. And I often talk about this expression. I say like actions only speak louder than words when your intentions are clear, which is kind of what you say here. You want to make sure that the person who's observing your action knows the meaning
Yeah.
behind it. If I don't know the meaning behind your actions, I'm going to read it from
Right.
my point of view. So that's essentially that relationship between intention and perception. They're both internal factors. The only external factor is action, and it can speak different things to different
So
people.
what's the way to rectify this? It's a great way to diagnose the problems, right? Are you saying that the is kind of the onus on both parts of the couple, so the person who has the action to explain their actions, or for you to ask questions when you're interpreting it, which or both?
It's both. I have strategies both for the person who is taking the action and the person who's receiving the action. Right. So one of these strategies, and this was one of the last strategies that I've identified, but that I've been using it so much, is what I call the preamble, right? So the person who's giving the action. The preamble is when I tell you what I need from you from the coming interaction. So if I just need to vent and I start talking to somebody, but I haven't told them that I need to vent, the person who's receiving it is one, trying to listen to me, and two, trying to identify, well, what do you want from me out of this? And most people, I don't have statistics on this, I'm just saying out of my empirical experience, personal and professional, most people believe that if somebody is venting to them, it's because they want a solution
Especially
to
if
their
that
problem.
person is a man. Yeah.
Right. So then when you give a solution, you are met with frustration of the solution that you've given, and now I'm defending my problem to you. I'm frustrated at you for giving me solution. I have an attitude, and you're like, why are you frustrated at me?
Yeah,
You've
for
experienced that.
sure. Almost every couple
So
that
the
comes in complains about it at some point.
Right. And so like the preamble is, hey, I am really frustrated. I need to talk. You don't even need to listen. You can continue playing your video games or doing your thing. Right? Are you able to give me that? And the person has the right to say yes or no. Or it's like, hey, I would really like for you to help me with a solution to this problem. But let me just finish saying first before you stop. Because if you interrupt, I'm just going
Yeah.
to,
And
on
people articulate
tangents.
that specific point in different ways, right? Sometimes someone will come in and say, I feel like they don't have any empathy, or like, they don't understand why we're talking. But you're right, that's a pervasive problem with couples.
Because we think that our intentions seem clear to others when
Right.
they don't. And the things that I notice so much is like there's no other way of interpreting what I'm doing. There are so many other ways to interpret what is being done. But even in the preamble, there's a secondary function to it, which was the last thing that I actually added to the book when I noticed, which is not just for me to tell you what I need from you in the coming interaction and giving you the right to say, hey, I'm able to do this, or no, I can't give this to you right now. But it also helps with softening the blow of an
Yeah.
uncomfortable situation, right? When I let you know what the intention behind what I'm going to say is before I actually. So let's say, like, you've done something that I disliked. I can say, in trying to foster this wonderful relationship that we have in trusting each other and being open to one another, I wanted to be able to voice the times when I dislike something as much as I would love for you to do it as well. I don't think it's going to come out the best way, but I want you to understand the intention behind it. I think it gives a little bit of grace in knowing that I don't know how to say it. My words will probably not be that great, but people won't fixate so much on the wrong
Yeah,
words that are.
that's quite clever, as opposed to just saying you never spend time with me. Which is a pretty harsh criticism that someone is going to just put up swords and get defensive with.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah,
That's
absolutely.
great.
So that is, I mean, that's one of the strategies. I can talk about if time permits. And by the way, like, I'm like doing a TED talk on this, so
That's not
stop me at
funny.
any moment for the love of
Are
God.
you doing an actual TED
I
talk, or
can't stop.
are you okay? Just joking
No,
around. Yeah, yeah. I get. Yeah, yeah. We all.
I
That's
go
the any
over,
psychoeducation portion of a counseling session is a TED talk, and we all. It's like, oh God, how long are we gonna go? Yeah.
but my goal, we'll do a TED talk on this. But in again, continue from the point of the person who is speaking. I created the three columns of communication. And in the three columns of communication, the idea behind it is in column one, you pull on John Mayer and you say what you need to say, right? Not to the intended person, for the love of goodness. You are simply venting everything that is unfiltered out loud. So, like, when life gives you stresses, use one of your five senses, either journaling, the sense of touch, vision, doing it under the shower, you're feeling the water cooling you down. But once you've identified what are the venting of the things that I need to say, column two is deciphering the message. What do I actually want the intended person to receive? And I have specific questions on the worksheet that I created, which is like, why do you want them to get this message? What purpose will it serve and to what end? And what do you expect in return? And then the third one is, what is the best delivery method? Knowing that individual, right? Do I know them enough to know what the best delivery method would be, including using, sports analogy, because I know that you
Sure.
like sports. Um, and if I don't, then I go over the I statement formula and the do's
Right.
and don'ts when it comes to, because people say, I know the I statement. I feel like
Right.
you. I'm like, no, 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 you're cheating.
Yeah. Yeah. It negates everything. Do you feel? I mean, one thing that I've noticed is a lot of people say, "Well, am I going to have to do that forever? Do I have to give this preamble forever? Does it ever get easier in your experience where people where the intentions are starting to be read better in the relationship?
Yes, I kind of think about it in math, like when you're learning math, the teachers will often tell you, like, don't just show me the final answer. I need to know that
Yeah,
you
show
know
me
how to
your
get
work.
there. Show me your work. And a lot of the times we don't show the work, we just go for the final thing. When we don't know the other person enough to understand how they see things and their perspective and their intentionality, we will perceive their actions through our lens. When the other person has done it enough, now I know what you mean. So you then become able to actually just give the answer without showing the
Yeah.
work. But I've been with my husband for
Uh-huh.
12 years now, and we've been doing the IAP for a while. And up to today, we use the preamble. Up to today, like, we talk about different things. Like, we don't, uh, it became part of our vocabulary to be able to communicate with each other using the
Yeah.
IAP. But I know a lot of the times what he means. So I even say, like, you don't need to give me the preamble. I got you.
Yeah, that's
and
a
vice
great
versa.
scenario where you're like, I'm on board. You don't, cut you off there and jump straight into it. I think that this, speaks to. I just had a couple in yesterday where, they've been struggling for a few years. They're a young couple, and she said, when you did this one thing, I think when he left. They had a big fight, so he left at to go to a hotel, and she said, I felt like you were doing it to punish me, right? And so there's the intended the perception of the action, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I it was a little like too chaotic in the session to kind of explain the whole IAP model from scratch. But what I did kind of stumble upon was, and this is where I think the IAP model I think has the goal of going in the long term, is if you can assume that your partner is doing everything out of love and respect and because they want the best for you, then the IAP model has kind of done its job. When you've gotten to the point where like that's the assumption. So like if my wife does something rude, right, to me, and I have that internally, like, oh, I know she loves me. So what's going on? Oh, maybe she had a hard day. Maybe she's having a
Yeah.
fight with her mom, right? Because now it's not about this this perception of, well, they hate me, I feel abandoned, clearly they don't value the relationship. But that's a lifelong journey. Like I have couples in their 80s that don't get there. So
And but even what you're saying, now we go into the strategy that I've put for the receiver, which is the rule of three interpretations, right? We tend to have our automatic interpretations of things that can come from triggers that precede the relationship that stays with us, that we're not even aware of the fact that they are there until a behavior comes. So in the rule of three interpretations is once something happens, we have our automatic thought. For some unforsaken reason, it tends to just be a negative thing. I don't know why. It seems to be the case. So I ask that you pause and then identify two other possibilities, right? Two other interpretations of, in this case, like he left and went to the hotel. My first interpretation is you did it to hurt me. Then the secondary, I ask that if you think worst case scenario or taking it personal, that you go the opposite way, right? Best case scenario or taking it away from me is he thought he caught COVID, so he wanted to be far away from me. I don't
yeah,
know,
great example. Yeah.
right? Or and then like a likely or neutral case scenario. He was having a really difficult day and he didn't want to lash out on me, so he thought it would be the best thing that he stayed away, right? Um, then you get to choose the one that serves you best. If you're pissed and you want to end things with the person and the first one serves you best, do you. You chose it. But if you notice that any of the other two serves you best, choose the one that serves you best. It's not the
Yeah.
best case scenario. Just identify, understand that there is a fact, there are things that are known, and then there are things that are assumptions, or embellishments. When using, I struggle with anxiety, right? And the rule of three interpretations has been amazing with my anxiety. And so being able to sometimes determine that I don't know enough to actually react in this way and choosing that assumption because that is the one that serves me best, it tames that anxiety, causes me to respond as opposed to react.
I love that. I mean, knowing myself, because I've never done that. Even though we talked about it, I obviously haven't read your book yet. So this, what do you call it? The rule of three interpretations?
Rule of three interpretations, which there is a video and a free video and worksheet on advocate2create.teachable.com.
Advocate
Um,
to the number
but yeah,
two. So advocate to
the
the
number,
number two create.teachable.com. That's where they can get it.
yeah, it A to
Okay,
C for
got it.
short. Uh,
Yeah, that's a great place to get. Knowing myself and the way I communicate, I could see myself getting those three interpretations and then going to my wife and saying, "So you did this thing, and in my head there's one of three possibilities," and telling her all three and saying, "Which one is it?" And her probably saying, "None, there's a fourth," but at least that opens the dialogue, right? At least that says, where are you coming from? And
Yeah.
it's so helpful.
And a lot of the times, what ends up happening is that we have the facts, right? We have something that happened, and then our interpretation of the fact. And when we don't pause to identify that this is a interpretation, this now seems like it's a fact. Like when I used to teach for SAT and ACT, and I would incorporate like test anxiety, and some of the students say like they are thinking is, "Oh, I'm gonna fail." And they will repeat it so many times. The only fact in front of them is there is an exam,
Yeah.
right? And I'm nervous about the exam. But then when I start behaving from the thought I'm gonna fail as if that were a
Right.
written future, then all the behaviors will go according to that. And it's very similar when it comes to couples, right? So the what I like to say is the rule of three interpretations allow you
Yeah.
to zoom out and see that more than just that initial narrative that I've created because it makes
Yeah.
sense in my mind.
Absolutely. You know what the funny thing is it takes the bad part, which is that worst case scenario you're imagining automatically, um, is often a game I play with anxiety patients quite often, where I'll say, "What's the worst case scenario?" And I actually think that they don't go far enough, right? So it's like if someone has, for example, financial anxiety, yeah, and I'll say, "What's the worst case scenario?" It's like, "Well, worst case scenario, I won't be able to make my rent," and I'm like, "Okay, and then what?" And then what, right? And you get
Yeah.
to the root of what it is, which is, the ultimate disaster that's kind of perpetuating the fear. But the funny thing is you hide it from yourself, right? So it's like in couples work, it's like, well, the worst case scenario is he doesn't want to be around me. I'm like, okay, and then, well, and then he would get divorced and I'd be alone, and then, right, and then I'd have to meet a new person or die alone. Okay, so that's what you're afraid of, right? And getting to that root, and so sometimes, like, I caught myself in my own relationship there, and I could just go straight to my wife and say, "Is this something we're getting divorced over?" Right? And she says no, and I go, "Okay, well then I got nothing to worry about. So like, let's just deal with the." And it's incredibly liberating.
Yeah. Even I love how you said that because it comes to my mind. There was this couple that I was working with, and even in my own relationship, the difference between are you okay or are we okay? Sometimes I'll ask, are you okay? Because whatever is going on with you is making me insecure about us. And the other person is like, yeah, I'm okay. What? Like, and their response may not satisfy my nervousness about the relationship. Versus if I say, hey, are we okay? The person may say, we're okay. I'm just not.
And that's also incredibly comforting. And it also puts you in a
Yeah.
position of, well, can I help? Which strengthens the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is something that you had mentioned in the book, right? In seeking for forgiveness, being able to ask, like, what do you need from me for
Right.
that forgiveness? And in the boundary setting in the book, the question that I like to pose is, what do I need? What do I need from you to give
Right.
you what you need? Right. So being able to identify in that, setting those boundaries, what one, there's the assumption that I know what you need, so I need to ask, right? And then I'll tell you, what do I need from you to be able to give you what you need, which is what you've just stated to me.
I keep going back to, like, why do we go to the negative first or the worst? And I think, my as I uncover, like, the deep rooted motivations, I always come back to people. It's always There's only two motivations in life: survival and love. That's it. And so when you start uncovering, okay, is this a love problem or a survival problem? But I mean, both of them unfortunately have an alarm system. So if your relationship is unstable and you feel like you're going to be, on uneven ground, you're going to go to, well, now I got to worry about my relationship. So yeah, oh, and then I'm going to be alone, and then life is meaningless. That's essentially the core fear, right? And so your brain,
Yeah,
because it's like, what's the use of you saying, oh, they left the room, they probably need space, right? Like, it's like, that's so positive that your brain's like disengaged with any threat. And that's a great place to be, but it's almost like, well, then what's my role here? I don't know what to, it's like my whole point is to be an alarm system, so give me something to do. It's kind of fun.
I get that, and it's it's funny because with a couple that I saw earlier today, that was one of the things that we were talking about, which comes a lot from like growing up. At least I know in my household, like growing up, like getting an A was not an accomplishment. It's just what you're
Expected, yeah.
supposed to do, right? Well, in school is your job. My job is to make sure that you're fed. However, if you got anything that you've done wrong, there was so much weight given to it, but very little weight really given to the things that are going well. So growing up, I learned to give a lot more weight to my failures than I did my accomplishments. And I, in conversations with people that I know, with clients, with friends, with partners, and I would ask about like compliments. Why do people get so awkward about getting a compliment? And I would hear, well, compliments are fluff. Criticism lets me know what I'm doing well or what I need to improve upon. But compliments don't do anything. And that's when I created instructive compliments, because I said compliments have a purpose, which is to tell you what you're doing well, so you keep on doing them, right? As much as a criticism has a purpose, which is to tell you what is not being done well so you can improve upon. But not of everything that you're not doing well does not mean that 100% of it needs to change. So I need to know the percentage that I need to just maintain, and then the percentage that I need to change. I think there is a difference between like an empty compliment versus an instructive one. Like with my husband, if I just tell him like the food is good, he doesn't really take that. But if I say, hey, like the rice was on point, it was like it was not too clunky, but it was not like so dry. Like the amount of salt was perfect. Okay, now like
Now he's making
he
a mental
knows
note.
that
Oh, I
this.
used 1 extra tablespoon. I should do that next time as well. I like the idea of
Yeah.
instructive
And so I
compliments. That's a really useful tool.
Yeah, and even in conversation with the couple that I had, and I said we voice so much more our complaints, our criticisms of each other. So I said, make sure that there is a frequency of instructive compliment. Be cheesy about it. Say, what is it that you are doing well in the relationship? What am I doing well? Which then gives more of a cushion for me to then say what I would like more of or less of.
Fantastic. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I can't wait to read this book. So you're saying possibly August. If they go to Advocate to Create and sign up for um, the three
Patience.
interpretations, yeah, will they, will that kind of get them into your world so that you can alert them when the book comes out?
I will make sure, because through there you're able to subscribe. So I'll make sure to send an email out once the book comes out, which will be through Amazon.
What's it
By the
called? By
way,
the way, we didn't
my
even talk
book,
about the title.
Why Are We Fighting? Actionable Strategies for
Why
Effective
Are We Fighting?
Communication.
Great title. Great, great title.
Yeah. And I wanted it to be a short book, kind of like instructions manual. So the first two chapters are about the theory, right? The first chapter being the intention, perception, the internal factors. Then second chapter is the external. Chapter 3 is how do I put it into practice? So I talk about all the strategies. And for those who are kinesthetic visual learners like myself, chapter 4 are all the worksheets that I have for us to put these into practice, including the one for the rule of 3 interpretations that you can download. And I've actually added a couple bonus worksheets that I had created. I have one that I call Me in 3D, and then the We in
Nice.
3D for being couples or outside of the couple. You can be any we that we have. So
Okay,
yeah.
it's going to be in the show notes as well, but I'm going to just say it again. It's advocate to the number 2 create.teachable.com. You can get the worksheet there. Join Dr. T's email list so that you're alerted when Why Are We Fighting comes out on Amazon. And I'm excited to read it myself. I can't wait to get my hands on a copy.
Absolutely. I'm so excited
Thanks
for
for
it.
coming back on the show and telling us all about it.
Thanks for having me.
If you're interested in learning how to get the absolute most out of your romantic relationships, then you're in luck, because I have put together a free workshop or masterclass, if you will, about 3 secrets that people in happy relationships have discovered. You can view the workshop at misunderstandings.com/3 secrets. Again, it's completely free. Just go there and watch it. It'll help you on your journey, give you some wisdom, some things to think about. The website again is mrspirituality.com/3 secrets. That's mrspirituality.com/3, the word secrets. It's all yours. Enjoy.